Hey guys, it's Matt. In the past year and a half or so, you've heard me talk or mention many times about Goldilocks reality. I'm going to dive into that in detail in this video, in this presentation. Goldilocks reality. Well, in the old fairy tale, and even in the way science uses it today, it's the porridge is not too hot, it's not too cold. We'll look at the origins of Goldilocks itself, the legend, and how a useless, seemingly useless, ridiculous story like that is artificially carried through time by the system. We'll examine that. But not too hot, not too cold. Science latches onto it and says, "Oh, the Earth as it goes around the sun. What are the chances that if the Earth was just a little farther away, like out where, say, Mars is, it would be freezing cold and nothing could live here. And if the Earth was just a little bit closer to the sun, like where Venus is, it would be unlivable. The only thing that could live there would be that giant robot that took on Steve Austin. So we're in this Goldilocks zone, and the chances of that, of course, are 1 in a trillion, and it's just another series of 1 in trillions that the atheists latch onto and just say life just sprung up out of nowhere, and it makes perfect sense. But science even says Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold. But when we have talked about it regarding a label or a tag we put on the reality itself, it's whatever it presents to anybody, whether it's going to present something on the news, it's going to present something telling you this is the way your history went down. It gives just enough to the guy down your cul-de-sac where he believes the official story, but there's always just enough there where we look at it and be like, that's ridiculous. That's completely fake. So it's always just right down the middle. Now, it has been very right down the middle over the last 20 years. If anybody's saying to me now, well, Matt, the presentations are ridiculous now, and it's kind of lost its ability to Goldilocks. True, we have more veils we've dropped. We've sharpened our spiritual blades. We see it a lot more easily. It's having a tough time, at least from our perspective, doing what it used to do to us, more that Goldilocks. But it's still Goldilocks because it's whatever presentation the news makes about any topic is so obvious to us that it's a fabrication. It's still believed by the guy down the cul-de-sac or the normies. So you could say it's still Goldilocks, but it's not as perfect as it used to be in terms of its presentation being right down the middle of how it could be interpreted. Maybe it doesn't need to be anymore. Before getting into the detail, let me provide a brief summary as to where this will end up going, and then we'll jump back into the detail, and I'll present details of where it's applying. And I was going to say where it's applying its Goldilocks. It applies its Goldilocks endlessly. And the point is to reach step 2 of the 3 steps, which ultimately we don't want to spend too much time on step 2, but understanding its Goldilocks nature gets you to step 2 of what I call, my 3 steps. For anybody new, spend 1 minute. Step 1, I don't know, 1% of the population comes around that, pretty much every presentation that comes out of news media, academia, most of science, at some point it breaks down as being just ridiculous, it doesn't hold water, or it's completely fake. So you get to step 1, and then that's why it gives you hundreds and hundreds of graduated animal farms, so you'll continue to chase and analyze step 1 for the remainder of your natural life. It's fine giving all the information away as long as you stay on step 1. Then you can get to step 2, and this is the nature of this analysis, Goldilocks, is what kind of reality could pull all of this off, and pull it off in a way where you, seemingly some conspiracy theorist or truther, see the fraud in it, but your mother doesn't, or your sister doesn't, or your neighbor, the guy down the cul-de-sac, doesn't. It gives just enough to us where we see it, but just not enough where we get a huge win or it breaks down, or everybody then wakes up to it. It never makes a gigantic mistake. There's no normal world that could do this. There's no normal reality or what you think of the world that could do this, that could pull this off. even if I talk about the reality like it's in some way alive, we'll talk about that. But even if you think it's first level or first grade truth, just coordinated by people and just coordinated by secret societies making phone calls amongst each other, it's all coordinated by men and women who sit down on the pot. That's first grade truth, if you ask me, but it doesn't matter. Even if you believe it's coordinated by them, well, how could this keep happening, pulling it off time after time? It's not. So you get to step 2 and you go, no real world could pull this off, a decade after decade, century after century. So then step 3 is, what does that tell us about ourselves? It tells us you're a very, very powerful spiritual entity that something wants to feed off of. But we're not going to do step 3 here. It's about step 2, the Goldilocks reality. And one of the reasons I'm making this video, we're doing a detailed analysis of this Goldilocks principle, is a new twist on my original, and it's not a theory, it's just kind of an observation I had. There's no other way to describe it. Keeps doing business in a certain way. The reality itself, I labeled it Goldilocks, but there's a new twist or theory. And I'm sure many people would eventually want me to address this, so I'll address it right off the bat. Some people, and rightly so, would say, Matt, what's Goldilocks about Robbie Parker coming out to a podium looking like somebody just told him the greatest knock-knock joke in the world with a few smiles and shits and giggles before the day after he supposedly lost his first grader? That's not Goldilocks, Matt. That's fucked up. That's not Goldilocks. Anybody can see through that. I'll give you that. I understand that. I understand. Matt, what's Goldilocks about Chris Hurst, coming out and doing 5 interviews the first day, 5, 6, or 7 interviews the second day? She gave me this book, showing the same book, smiling through it. Good night, sweet boy. I mean, there's nothing Goldilocks about that. Somebody screaming at me from Topeka. I understand that. And that is part of the wrinkle on the principle. The presentation of reality was true Goldilocks even 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Say, again, let's just go back to the same old presentation, the Apollo moon landings. Okay, it's so easy for us to see through it today. But again, hindsight's 20/20, Monday morning quarterbacking. When it was happening, there's many truthers that have come to me and said, Matt, my father, my grandfather barked out, that ain't real during it. That's rare, man. Okay, that's rare. People didn't see 1/100th of what we see today. The reality is evolving itself in a certain way where it has to show itself to those that are, sharpening spiritual blades and dropping veils like us. But its presentation was more believable. Even the ridiculous conversation with Buzzed Cauldron and Neil and President Nixon in real time with 8-second delay give me a break. But its presentation was better, where it is starting to break down today, where you could say it's almost not true Goldilocks in many areas. But I'm not just talking about the fake events. There's a whole lot of the way the reality or this whatever this experience is we're in the middle of, it presents a lot of different things. It's not just fake events, fake bang events. The fake bang events, for some reason, the presentation has to almost be ridiculous. But just look at the presentation of the stock market, for example. We see that there's nothing real about it. There's no real supply and demand forces and real people moving supply and demand that moves the market. We see it's completely rigged, probably run on some sort of War Games Whopper supercomputer. But that's nobody's going to believe that. I mean, I don't know. Is that it is? Someone would say, well, Matt, that is getting ridiculous, the stock market. That's a bad example. Every single business has been 80% empty for the last year, but the market races up like it's happy days will hear again, the early parts of 1929, before the big crash. Okay. But let me just get to the theory then, all right? Because this will address your screaming at me. The theory is the presentation, let's see, just a few decades ago, it was true Goldilocks. It was much better at it. For some reason, it is losing its ability to present a true Goldilocks. But they're kind of making up for it on the other side through some sort of mind control. I guess that's That's the best way to put it. They're making up for it. So the presentation of just anything, throw a dart. Okay, we look at it and go, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely absurd. How come people can't see through it? And people can't see through it because that's when we come up with theories like they're under some sort of download. They're under some sort of spell. There's some sort of mind control where people can't see these ridiculous presentations of reality that appear like on Aaron Burnett out front. So it's almost like their craft in terms of presenting it true Goldilocks has broken down, but broken down intentionally, and they're making up for it via like a mind control. And if this was plotted or planned in a back room, somebody might raise their hand and say, well, if we break the reality down and present a clown show, and every single facet, every single genre of reality becomes a clown show, there's going to be this whole segment of people over here, the real spiritual beings that wake up and see right through it. And it's almost like if you play out what may have gone down in the back room, and that's how the reality works, is nothing goes down in the back room. We don't know how it happens. That's the fascinating part of it. It's not just in the back room people talking. That's what's so fascinating about it. That's first grade truth. But that's the only way we can understand it. If we say that ultimately there's a back dark room where it's all plotted and planned out, it doesn't work that way. That's first grade truth. Well then, Matt, how does it work? I don't know. We don't have to know. We just have to understand it and understand what it's trying to do to us. So if somebody raised their hand and says, this truther group here is going to wake up to it and see right through it, and they'll be like, you know what? Fine. We can't get everybody. They'll wake up to it, and then we'll use them and manipulate them to push the reality where we want it anyway. We'll use them anyway. Let them wake up to it. Then we really can use them. But fine, let them wake up to it. We have to apply these certain mind control techniques or this download or the spell over the general population. And it's almost like a zero sum. The more the reality breaks down into a clown show, the more they offset it through things and techniques and technologies we don't understand, that we just call, for lack of understanding it, download, mind control. I mean, a Robbie Bobby moment, I'm using the hobo code there where I don't have to, was really a point where it was like a really dividing line between them trying to present a reality in a true Goldilocks fashion in a serious nature and a true clown show that exists today that for some reason we can't understand, nobody can see. And let me back up a bit, because the reality's presentation of everything is not yet where we look at it and just see a ridiculous movie like the attack of killer clowns from outer space. Look at the corona COVID thing. Now, of course, there's hundreds for something. If they're going to pull something off this massive, maybe 1,000 times larger than 9/11, of course, people like us that have veils dropped are going to see certain presentations are Attack of the Killer Clowns from Outer Space, like German statute that says you can only get 3 licks, was it 3 licks? That's like the 33 dropped in the Owl commercial, in the Tootsie Roll commercial. How many licks can you get in a Tootsie Pop? I'm going to give it to Mr. Wise Old Owl. And he says, 3 licks. So that's a drops of 33. It's a 33 drop in a Tootsie Roll commercial. That's as obvious as you cannot be serious. Plus, in the Tootsie Pop commercial, it's the Bohemian Grove Owl. It's the Bohemian Grove Owl. 3 licks. It's the Bohemian Grove Owl in the Tootsie Pop commercial. No, people coming into this would be like, these guys are crazy talking about this stuff. And most people listening to this are like, yeah, that's right. I can see that. That's Scarlett from 4 Weddings and a Funeral. And if anybody's struggling with what I was talking about with the German statute, I didn't complete my thought, but something came out like in May or April or I don't know, last year or June, where a certain part of Germany put a statute out that if you get an ice cream cone, you are allowed, I think it was 3 licks. It might have been 4 licks. The amount of licks doesn't matter. I don't think it's a huge coding in this one. You were allowed a certain amount of licks on premises before you had to take your ice cream so many 50 yards off premises to be safe. And you think there was actually anybody arrested for the extra lick? Do you think there was ever anybody that went through the lower Germany Munich court system, the Bavarian court system, because they took the extra lick? I don't know. Maybe. It's possible in Europe. I mean, we think things are bad here in the United States. It's Australia and Europe are much worse. But there's a guy in jail right now, maybe because he took the lick. He took the extra lick. 2 guys right now are put together in a German jail cell. What are you in for? Pretty bad. I'll just talk regular English. Well, I picked these kids up. They wanted to go to Bratislava, but they wanted to go to Berlin. They wanted to go to Berlin, but I took them to and killed them in Bratislava. So I'm in for murder. What are you in for? An extra lick. A lick? Oh, that's disgusting. You're one of those guys. No, of an ice cream cone. It's not all Attack of the Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I mean, yes, we'd say, well, Matt, who could possibly believe in this corona thing that they're presenting? It's still Goldilocks. And to do this on a worldwide basis is incredible. It's means and mechanisms that are not human and things we just simply will never understand. It's just, we see right through it, of course. And my position is there is something. It's not a giant hoax. Come on, we're way past that. My cousin was sick with it for 30 days. There's something making people sick. The news presents it as the worst thing that ever happened to humanity. They're using it to move all of society worldwide into a certain dark place. It's not that serious overall. Okay, there's something making people sick. I didn't say it was germ or germ theory. All I said is there's something making some people sick. But we see that all this reaction to it and shutdowns and lockdowns is absolutely not commensurate with whatever it is. So we see right through it, but this is still Goldilocks considering the magnitude of the extent of what they're pulling off. Where, I'll try to say, Dad, why do you believe in all this? Look, he'll know one person. And everybody knows just this one person, or there's somebody that they know died, or somebody got very sick. And they just need that one case, that one event where it validates everything that's coming on the news. Oh, I don't know that guy down the end of the block very well, but I know he was near death and he was tested positive early on. And now this has happened or that happened. The reality has just got people to latch on to just 1 or 2 cases where they use that in perfect Goldilocks fashion to validate every statistic the news throws at them. And it is incredibly well done in terms of the evil genius behind this. So in terms of what we see through, because everybody just knows that one person, or my friend Tony, I'm sure, just has one guy at work that was on the verge of death because of coronavirus, they're not going to buy anything that we say about what we see through. It's Goldilocks. It's Goldilocks. It's not as, people cry hoax. Well, if every single hospital's been empty for 10 months and that's not a hoax. It's just Goldilocks. It's just enough for the normies to camp on to the official story. Nurses have come forward to me, several, and during the height of it, they said, "Yeah, we have 50 people here diagnosed with coronavirus. There's some, and 49 of them are going to get out of the hospital in 2 or 3 days." And one guy's kind of sick, and one guy died, and yeah, there's like thousands of deaths from the regular flu. It's not like the hospital. There's nobody sick. It's a giant hoax. That's ridiculous. And I didn't say what's making people sick. I just said something is making people sick that they're calling CV-19, and it's enough to validate the official story with the normies around us. That's all I said. I'm sure you have a similar story to me. This is what the reality does. If I was a normie and I believed everything that Erin Burnett out front used to in the old days, want to take her out back, but not interested anymore, just to say never had any interest in vintage space. When the statistics come on, if I was a normie, I would immediately think of my cousin. Oh, my smart cousin who's done work, or she might have been on the MIT payroll at one point. I don't know. This is like a distant cousin that I haven't talked to for decades. But it would be like, oh, I know she got sick and she had complications. She was sick on and off for 30 days and has some weird complication or something. Now, the rest of my family just Captain Crunch for brunch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, not the healthiest group. The rest of my family, oh, they're just healthy. No, they don't get it. But the healthiest one seemingly gets it. See, if I was a normie, then Erin Burnett would present her statistics out front, and then I would just think of my cousin. And of course, because I know she was sick, and she's a very, very upfront person, very smart. She's not going to lie or anything. It's just, obviously, it's whatever made her sick, and they called it corona. She was sick from whatever the cause is. But because I know a case close to me, then that's all I need to validate the bull crap statistics that come on the news. The bull crap statistics that show hundreds of thousands of deaths in the United States, all attributed to coronavirus and CV. And what are we up to in Hong Kong? 7 million people packed on top of each other. For 5 or 6 months, Hong Kong had 3 deaths. I don't know, the last time I looked, like 120 deaths. It's just not possible. I mean, we don't know what's making certain people sick, but it's way overblown. And it's just not possible that Hong Kong, with something in the lo mein or something protecting people, it's not possible they could have 120 or 150 deaths, 7 million people living on top of each other. And the U.S. is just hundreds of thousands, death everywhere you turn. It's death. They're going to have to put the bodies just out in the street soon because there's nowhere to put them. It'll be like the dig out the Paris catacombs under New York City. It'll be like that Monty Python. Bring out your dead. Bring out your coronavirus dead. Somebody got on me recently where I will often say the reality does this or that, and in a way we'll never truly understand. And the email was, I guess, a little more polite than this, but it was kind of like cop-out. Matt, it's a cop-out. Your attitude's a cop-out, saying, we'll never understand that. And, the email kind of alluded to is like, well, no, I'm a smart person. Real smart people will understand it. And no, it's not a cop-out. It's not a cop-out if you see the game that the reality wants you to play. Here we go again. Rabbit holes. Chasing the bait. Chasing the rabbit holes. It wants you to constantly try to figure it out. Saying all we need to understand are certain things about ourselves. We'll never understand this mechanism over here. That's the what's his name? Is it Barry in Joel Goodson's Risky Business? He's like, Joel, sometimes I'm going to say a curse, do earmuffs if there's anybody young listening. This is from Risky Business. Is Joel, sometimes you just have to say, what the fuck? What the fuck gives you freedom? Freedom brings opportunity. Opportunity makes your future. Sometimes in this community, we just have to say, we'll never figure it out. Then we can leave the chase behind. We'll never figure it out. Never coming to the conclusion that we're never going to figure it out, and we don't have to, provides freedom. Freedom to pursue what's truly important, not chase the bullshit. See? Does the truly wise man or woman believe they have to figure it all out? Or does the truly wise man or woman say, look how limited this experience is inside this avatar. What do we have? We have taste, smell, hearing, touch, vision. And people would say, well, can you hear everything? I don't know. There's like tons of shit dogs can hear that we can't hear. Can you see everything? No, we see inside this little tiny sliver called the visible light spectrum. It's like a spaghetti noodle, an uncooked spaghetti noodle. And then there's all these frequencies that go like 50,000 miles to the left and 50,000 miles down the spectrum to the right. And we just see in this and this. So you admit your senses don't give you shit. They don't give you like the scene out of Point Break. Squat. Your senses don't give you squat. You produced exactly squat. Caught my first tube today. The senses don't do anything for you, but we're going to somehow use these senses that give you next to nothing to take in complete information about how the reality works. No, you say, I ain't going to figure it out. It's beyond human understanding. And what does that mean for me? It's simple. I haven't quite figured it out. Many times I don't have it figured out, but I can kind of point to it. Like Donald Sutherland screaming at a non-body snatched. I can point to it and be like, there's meaning there. The endless mantra and endless repeating of John Malkovich in Dangerous Liaisons to Michelle Pfeiffer, using it to break with her of, it's beyond my control. Why are you saying that to me? I must break with you, Michelle Pfeiffer. It's beyond my control. Says it over and over and over. They tell him that's how you do it. That's how you break with her. You say it over and over and over and over and over. The Vicomte playing games with Glenn Close. It's beyond my control. And I pointed at him like, there's something there. I don't know what it means. If there's some kind of truth being delivered there. I haven't quite figured it out. But if you apply it here, it's like, well, all this shit, it's beyond figuring out. That's the way I'll apply it for now. How do we take all the Hillary Clinton type adrenochrome junkies to jail, and how do we restore society? It's beyond your control. Worry, W-O-Y, worry. Worry about yourself. That's what you're here to do in this reality. I'm here to we're going to find a way with Q to round up all the Hillary Clintons and the adrenochrome junkies and all the bad people. And we're going to then punish them inside their own systems that they created. And we're going to march them off into the jails, into the corporate jails that they created. That will actually make their cronies actually more money. So no, it's beyond our control. WOI is worry. Worry about yourself. That's what you're here to do. 2 chapters of the book I had to remove from YouTube that were 2 of the most important chapters that people liked the most. I guess I used some copyrighted material, and there were 2 times in this channel because of warnings and a strike where I just removed, I don't know, 60, 70 videos just to protect the channel. And of course, if anything happens to the channel, I'll be 100% all the time at freevoice.io. I had to remove the last conversation that you had before you incarnated into this reality, into this avatar. Last conversation before your incarnation on Earth, like the movie Soul. And by the way, these chapters do exist in the appendix of the book, the PDF. Give the PDF out to anybody that wants it. The other one was the first conversation you had after, or you may have, or one may have after a failed life, or a failed life test, or a failed life experience. And that could basically be applied here. Live your life a certain way. Escape the green room where they probably could potentially try to recycle you back. Am I really dead? Okay, and I'm really dead. The creeps can't get a hold of me. Now I'm really dead. And there is, whatever your religion may be, who's going to pull up a chair on the other side of you for the first conversation after a failed life? Would it be Jesus sitting down to talk to you? Muhammad to others? Buddha or a bodhisattva of some kind? An extension of your higher self? An extension of you? Brahma, Vishnu, Kali? Whatever it may be, there's going to be potentially that conversation. Maybe it's just you to you, but it might go something like this. You dumbass MFer. You took the bait. You followed Q. You thought your whole life was about creating a better society and taking the criminals off to jail. See, the person be giving yourself a lecture. Like, these idiots, that was the role they were playing. They're actually playing the role to get you to focus on them, to get you worried about nothing other than to take the criminals to jail and to restore society for the just and for the children. And no, you teach your children to understand their spiritual selves, to use the reality to better themselves, to become greater beings personally. It's a personal journey here. It's not about taking Hillary Clinton off and Anthony Weiner and Uma Abedin to jail. So you'd be getting that lecture in that first conversation after a failed life. You spent your whole life on Q, what is it called? 4chan, whatever. What the F is 4chan? To me, it's no different than foreskin. 4chan, worrying about the criminals. That was absolute. You can just sense that is such a ridiculous rabbit hole that the reality wants you running down, because it takes you thousands of miles away from understanding yourself. And guys, I know I have to return to the main point, Goldilocks reality. So many things that I need to discuss regarding Goldilocks reality, starting with examining the legend and lore of Goldilocks herself and what these nursery rhymes are all about. Just one last point, guys. Remember, I've been saying like 80% of the truth community is like compromised. Most aren't in on it or getting some sort of paycheck. They're serving the system without even knowing they're serving the system. I'm upping it to 90%. I think I upped it in a video a few weeks back to 90%. Just assume that 90% of the truth videos you're watching are in some way serving the system. Well, Matt, that could be you. It could be me. Okay, I have to address that every time, of course. Okay, I think I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the best I can. I think I'm doing a little bit better than most, but that you'll be the judge of that, of course. But it is 90%. And if anybody makes a huge mistake, I mean, you should literally abandon, first of all, the fear stuff. If they start pushing fear, abandon the channel permanently. I'm not competing with them or you want their subs. No, I don't give it. No, this is what's best for yourself. Trust me. If they push fear, if something's truly, guys, is it somewhat scary, the position they're putting the world into? Of course it is. I'm not some an untouchable rock up here. Of course, it's creepy and scary what they're moving the world into, and then medical passports are next. And show your medical passport. You're not getting into this Metallica concert. Of course, that's scary. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the hardcore fear all over the truth community. Shut down all the ones that jumped on shutting down meatpacking plants last March. You know these channels. You should never watch them again. All the plasma storms coming. We're all going to die. Come on, man. That type of bullshit fear. We'll address that some other time. But, or somebody makes a major mistake. Somebody talking about Pizzagate or something. Pizzagate. I mean, that was the biggest setup for the truth community to be played of all time. If anybody believes, I'll talk about that some other time, that was really Childs being run between Best of Pizza and Comet Ping Pong, and give me a break, dude. That was the biggest truther setup joke of all time. Me and Barry Satoro channel called it out right from the start. This is bullshit. We're all being played. And all the big channels, Pizzagate, we're finally exposing the pedos and the adrenochromes and all this David Seaman, what's he doing today? David Seaman coming out day after day talking about Pizzagate and the Podestas and how serious it is for kids. And that doesn't mean that sick stuff doesn't exist. So that's this first grade reaction from the truth community too. Well, Matt, then you must be for the side of the pedos. No, that's not how it works. The Pizzagate, as it went down, actually protected the sickos. I'll talk about that some other time. But how did it protect the sickos? It did. But you hear some big channel talking about that, and that's real or something, you should turn them off permanently. What a joke anybody would believe in Pizzagate. It was a 100% setup, James Oliphant said. What a joke. Perhaps the biggest truther psyop of all time, where literally they schemed and plotted to play this community, to use, abuse, and play and manipulate this truth community. Pizzagate was about us. And then the message we took to the people around us. A similar gigantic psyop on the truth community was the sloppy sniper from The Hook. Again, we're off of YouTube here, but who knows at some point we don't have a server farm here that we control. We're still going to be a little bit careful. Well, whatever, but there's no reason to push it when everybody knows what I'm talking about. The sloppy sniper, that whole situation where a grieving father played a sniper, an FBI agent. They played the same, the guy played the same role, but that was completely there to get the truth community to notice and to then play and use the truth community so it loses all its credibility. Talk about that some other time as well. But I'm sure there's one or two I'm missing. But Pizzagate and the sloppy sniper episode inside of Sandy's hooker, that they take the cake as, to me, the two biggest psyops ever played on our community, where our community was targeted and focused on. Okay, let's go all the way back to the beginning. Goldilocks reality, and we have to back up and talk about Goldilocks itself, and let's back up again and talk about nursery rhymes. Now, most people have heard me give this presentation, so I'll keep it under a minute or two. These nursery rhymes are carried forth artificially by the reality itself, or the shepherds of reality itself. They're not good enough to survive on their own. They're just not good enough. Especially Goldilocks, it sucks. Again, you've heard me do this. The first time this story would have been told, it'd be like, well, that's kind of interesting. And do you want to tell that to your kids? Do you want me to write it down? No, that's okay. It's okay. It was nice, but I don't need it. I don't really want it. It would have gone anywhere. It wouldn't have gone anywhere. It's really a really horrible story. So these nursery rhymes are carried through history artificially by the system or by the reality itself, because there's deep messages in these nursery rhymes, the way a movie carries a certain truth, or a certain piece of art carries a bit of truth, whether the truth is channeled or the artist knows about it or not. That's the way these nursery rhymes work. That's the reason we all still know them. Just another minute or two. This is fascinating. They're just not good enough. Goldilocks. For anybody, we all forget, but Goldilocks, here's the synopsis. This girl completely doesn't give a shit about who owns the house. Nobody's home, so she just goes in. Fuck them. Oh, look what I have here. There's 3 bowls of porridge. I guess I'll try all of them. Oh, this one's too hot. Oh, this one's too cold. Oh, this one's just right. So fuck the person who made it. I'm just gonna eat it all myself. Just eat it up. Oh, look, 3 chairs. This one's too big. Oh, this one's too big. Oh, this one's just right. So, and then I broke she breaks the chair. It's like the scene in Shallow Hal. What is these things made out of? Steel? She breaks the chair. Then she just goes right up to bed. Without any thought of who could own the house. A little girl? Well, she must not live in these modern times. Oh, this bed's too lumpy, and this bed's not a sort of perfect sleeper. Oh, this was like a purple bed. It's just right. She falls asleep. The bears come home. Like, who's in our bed? Oh, this one's been in my bed. It's all messed up. This one's been in my bed. There's Bill Clinton stains all over. This one is still sleeping in my bed. Then she runs out. All right, there's nothing to the story. It's absolute crap, and it would never have survived even the first day that whoever created it. It's that bad. And there's almost no other explanation. The reason these things survive is they're artificially carried through history, through time, like Victor in Underworld and Marcus leapfrogging through time, because there's a truth that the reality itself needs to be able to show the regular people if they're not too dumb to interpret it correctly. There's nothing dumberer than Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty. Hey, so where did this? They're all. There's no real understanding. It's all vague where they came from, and then where'd the Brothers Grimm get their shit? It's all vague. Well, because the reality sees to it somehow. Where'd Humpty Dumpty? Who's the first guy that wrote this up in 1650 outside of Braveheart's little village when he's putting the thatch back on his roof? He's like, if you want to stay out of the troubles, you may court me daughter. That's Irish. That's not Scottish. Whatever. He says, I made this up, William. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men put Humpty back together again. What you think? Dude, that sucks. Sucks. Get out of here. Yeah, off with you. The guy that made that up would be run out of the village, essentially. So they all suck for the most part. Little Mother Hubbard or, even they had Dice Clay make fun of it. Dice Clay, what's in the bowl, bitch? Dice, I don't know. Maybe Dice Clay just decided to do that and he wasn't in the back room Illuminati meetings. I don't mean to get too conspiratorial. Even it is possible even for me to get too conspiratorial. But looking at Humpty Dumpty, it wouldn't exist because it's horrible. There has to be a greater meaning. And it is our responsibility to determine what that greater meaning is for ourselves, okay? Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, cracked open. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty back together again. Well, first off, why was he looking? Why, it tells you all the king's horses and all the king's men looking outside, to put himself back together. He horcruxed a piece of his soul off, probably, Humpty Dumpty. He cracked. He's personally cracked. Anything outside of Humpty Dumpty can't put himself back together. Of course, the systems and the mechanisms of the time, the society, the king's horses and the king's men is going to be worthless in putting him back together. It's going to be worthless in doing anything. Why would he even allow medically the king's horses to work on him? But it's not about gluing an egg back together. It's not about that. It's probably about putting yourself back together. And in this, everybody's going to have a great fall in the society. Everybody's Humpty sitting on the wall going to fall off and crack. That's what this life experience is all about. It's these types of conversations where we get to the bottom of what these nursery rhymes really mean. Like when you look up, of course, every time you look at the system as to what it says Goldilocks means, it's all the same bullcrap, like how the movie reviewers just miss the truth in all movies. I looked at a few sites this morning, trust me, I'm looking to them to see what they say so I knew it would be some system bullshit the way when you look up what's Columbia represent in American history and heritage, or what is the Eye of Providence. That's my absolute favorite. What the official sources will tell you, the Eye of Providence, that eye on the back of the dollar bill, represents God looking down and supporting America's endeavors. Give me a break. And I knew it would be the same thing with Goldilocks. And it says, Goldilocks tells the story of being kind of amoral. Goldilocks is amoral, not caring for the property of others, and greed, saying I'll take the porridge for myself, and you can show kids how not to be through Goldilocks' actions. And she was eventually punished because she ran out of that brothel so scared because the bears showed up. And see, ultimately it will come, what goes around comes around, and all this, teaching kids about greed and morality. It's not, of course, it's never about the first grade interpretation of what society says it is. The other thing you get into is it's a little bit in conflict with me saying that the system itself artificially carries these stories through history, because the truth of them has to be carried forth. They're going to screw you on this side. They always have to give you a way out on this side. The yin and the yang must exist. They have to at least giving you a way out for yourself, for your own understanding, your own spiritual self to walk out of here. And what's a little bit in conflict with me saying they carry these nursery rhymes through artificially is what goes along with the story is most of these nursery rhymes, or many of these things, have changed over the years. For example, Goldilocks, they said initially, and I don't know if this is part of the official story to throw you off, I don't know, but this is a common theme in looking in the lineage or the history behind these types of legends and lures and nursery rhymes. So you'll find that, Goldilocks, it really looks like originally she was an old woman with gray or silver hair. Somehow it morphed into a young girl with golden hair. And it's similar to The Wizard of Oz. You look into, the original Frank L. Baum. Never trust anybody with three names like that puts an initial. Like, what is it? The Great Gatsby by F. Scott. Wait, what does that even mean? Why would you put by F. Scott Fitzgerald? Is his name Scott, or should I just call him F? I don't understand I don't trust people that do that. They're L. Frank Baum. But they said, the slippers were originally silver. So they were ruby slippers. And then you look into the history of it and you look at mainstream sources, and it will say, the silver slippers in the original, they wouldn't show up real well in this beautiful Panavision, one of the first color movies, so they were changed to ruby. Absolutely not. That is as bullcrap, in my opinion, as the official sources, what they'll tell you about the Eye of Providence and all those ridiculous explanations. Excuse me. I don't buy that for a second. There's so much symbolism in The Wizard of Oz. No, they didn't just change it so the filming it would be better on film. Oh, come on. There's so much symbolism there. And if anybody's screaming at me about, Matt, don't you understand what the silver represents? Frank L. Baum was making a statement about real money versus fiat currency and coming back to the silver standard. I fell for that. I don't buy that for a second. In anything major, there's usually three levels of interpretation or three levels of conspiracy. And I went down that path. Where I am as a truther or conspiracy theorist or somebody, that's next to Jeffrey in the 12 Monkeys Ward, whatever you want to call me today. I went through first grade truth, second grade truth, third grade truth. I thought Frank L. Baum and all that was just about making a statement about real money and a silver-backed currency, not a fiat currency, and I don't buy it. It's anything important in this world ultimately gets into the spiritual, the soul, the battle for the soul, the need for the system to remove a human being from its spiritual self. It always comes down to the big issues, not about a statement about real money versus fiat currency. No way. And although I'm not prepared to take a podium against somebody to argue against that. All I can say is it's not very successful in arguing with somebody or debating them at a podium. I can sniff it. I can smell it. And my inner knowing says that is absolutely not the case, because nothing that's that important in this culture is ever about something that trivial. It's always about the spiritual battle. So what exactly does Goldilocks mean? I don't know. That's not the purpose of this video, me to break down the true meaning. I think I'm close to I think it's pretty easy to see the meaning on Humpty Dumpty, his broke ass and what that's all about. The Goldilocks, I don't know. But that's not the point. The point of this conversation is Goldilocks reality, where they take the principle from Goldilocks. It's just right. This porridge is just right. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. And applying it to the way this reality does business. Always kind of right down the middle, So we see the absurdity. We turn the movie on and see killer clowns attacking from outer space. And our friends and family and neighbor and the guy down the cul-de-sac puts it on, and he sees a beautiful Cirque du Soleil presentation with wonderful comedy and wonderful acrobatics and death-defying stunts and beautiful movies and music and an orchestra. And we see killer clowns from outer space. And it's like, well, it's the same exact show with two different interpretations of reality. That's Goldilocks. And that's something that just regular men and women making phone calls couldn't do, my friends. And let's not leave out, the magical or mystical nature of Goldilocks. Again, if we're having private conversations in the back of the 12 Monkeys ward, there's no reason to hold anything back. Nobody not considered crazies here anyway. So you bring in some of the ideas introduced or we discussed again in a different way in the last video with the Philip K. Dick presentation. The alternative worlds, being able to step into other worlds, other realities, relates back to our own personal experiences with like chemtrails, where I said to this is very similar to the Mandela effect. It is. I said to my neighbor who is open to a lot of things, and he sees a lot of things, but he doesn't really care about conspiracy stuff. He's got a full family and a job, and he just doesn't want to be bothered by it, but he's pretty open. And I said, these planes come in with these huge trails, and isn't that kind of odd? Like all morning there's nothing, and then they'll come in like at 11, all of a sudden the sky will get kind of dark. And he's like, oh, that's always happened. Like you remember as a kid, like these planes would just come in and all of a sudden the sky would get kind of dark and dim from like 8 or 9 trails. Where were those planes all morning? He's like, that's always happened in my life. And we have to be big enough to think it could be like a Mandela effect, where it potentially in his reality, it always has been like that, completely normal. Even though you almost can't explain it when you break it down to a basic sense. Well, the atmospheric conditions didn't change from the morning, and there were 1,000 planes this morning. Why didn't they do it? See, even so, that even that might make perfect sense in his reality. Well, yeah, I know they don't do it in the morning. I remember in the afternoon they do it. That's just always been that case since I was a kid. You can't argue against that. It is possible that has always been his reality. Anybody that sees the Mandela effect will say you can't argue against that. It's not just a Kit Kat dash. It could be things as well as chemtrails. I believe we live in one gigantic Mandela effect that applies to many things outside of movie lines. So the magical, mystical nature of the Goldilocks reality, you have to bring that in where things are kind of shocking to us. Like, how come people can't see? How could a blue sky exist to 10:30, 11, and then all of a sudden the sky's all white and, trailed up, and just the sun has lost 20% of its, or 25 or 30% of its brightness. It almost gets kind of dark in some cases. It's so easy to see for us, but then your neighbor or your relatives like, that's completely normal. That's a Goldilocks reality principle. It's things we don't understand, but related to its ability to pull off its Goldilocks. It's pretty amazing how it does it. There are thousands of things, tens of thousands of potential topics where we could say the realities plays Goldilocks with the people around us versus our perception. Anything I'll just throw something I touched on probably briefly in the book and the PDF, but a fascinating subject, and I think it relates to Goldilocks, where I've said for years, how come there are no relatives of the founding fathers running around if everything, just assuming everything laid down in 1776 is exactly what history says it is? Obviously, I have big issues with it. Paul revered, the man that should be revered is the one that failed. He didn't even get his broke ass out to Lexington, Concord. He was detained. But, I have big problems with the whole thing. But nevertheless, Matt, didn't you know George Washington didn't have kids? Oh, okay. Yeah, here we go with that same old tired excuse again. But James Madison did, and Thomas Jefferson, and you'd have all sorts of people running around, whether real or not. You'd have people running around claiming to be related to the founding fathers and trying to make money and profiting off their name. Any sort of Franklin that would see, this is all that reality doesn't add up. For example, any Franklin that in any way could tie their name Franklin, even if it was vague, to Benjamin Franklin, if they had they were an electrician, you think that would help promote their business? My great-great-great-grandfather invented this shit. You can trust me to rewire your home. But no, now you know what you have? The reality presents a major plumber in whatever 3 or 4 or 5 states, Benjamin Franklin Plumbing. What? He didn't plumb, man. He was an electrician. I mean, well, they do one or the other. It's a special. Didn't you see Moonstruck? It's a specialty. They don't do both. It doesn't make any sense. So you'd have what would you have? I know in Washington, okay, didn't have kids or whatever, but you'd have, Washington could still find lineage through Washington's other relatives. He didn't have nephews, nieces, brothers. That just didn't exist. Martha Washington had no family. People would still trace their heritage through that way. Where are these relatives of the founding fathers today trying to make a name or say that they're related and then use that in some way to profit? Or you would, at least for a few founding fathers, you'd have a somewhat direct relative. Thomas Jefferson's whatever, great, whatever, shouldn't that person be doing the Sunday morning political shows? And this is the most direct line of Thomas Jefferson. That wouldn't be able to propel him or her to a certain degree of status. See, none of this adds up. These people just don't exist. And what's really strange about it, you don't have a group of people like even trying to fake it. Like even a guy who's a Franklin trying to fake it, saying he's related. You just have, it's all crickets. It's all quiet. It's like you would assume, it's almost like people would have tried this. I'm related to so-and-so, and I'm going to try to make money off his name. Or my mother always told me I was related to the framer of the Constitution, or the person that wrote it up, most of it up, James Madison. And I'm going to use that in a certain way. And then maybe the men in black show up and are like, no, you don't do that. Because we never hear anybody trying to do it. It's very, very odd. Whenever I go here, there's always going to be a small subset of people who are like, Matt, it was so far back. Who's going to trace that? It wasn't far back. This is what's kind of fascinating. I love this little exercise. I've probably done it before, and I did it in the book. It's not that far back. And this is the best exercise to see that it's not far back. And I apply it to myself. I think in the book I applied it to myself. So I remember the date. My grandfather's not living now, of course. But I remember the date my grandfather was born, 1912. Okay, my grandfather was born in 1912. So I can remember the date my grandfather was born. If he just did the same thing to his grandfather, it's possible a few founding fathers could still be alive, or they would have just died 10 years before. So you just have to do 2 jumps like that. I know when my grandfather was born, he just has to do the same exercise, and then his grandfather would have been right around the time the founding fathers were dying off. Yeah, assuming some people in certain families are at least going to have a few people living to 85 or 90, yeah, that's just a huge jump, like 4 people back to get to the founding fathers. That's just impossible to follow those lineages. So where are the people claiming they're the direct descendants of Washington? And not there. If you look through the internet, you're going to find, here's the closest living relative to whoever. But nobody's profiting or trying to profit from the name. All right, nobody's trying to use it to their advantage or establish an electrician shop using the name of somebody they think they're related to, Benjamin Franklin, who invented the damn thing. Well, you know what I mean. Okay, so that was interesting to go through that. I always like that exercise. But the point is, many of you, or kind of you see it the way I see it after that presentation. Like, yeah, it doesn't make sense. There's nobody we know running around we just know this guy is a relative of Madison or whatever, profiting from the name. Where are the relatives of J.P. Morgan? Where there are trillions running around? All that just doesn't exist. It's just very strange. So the point is, we would see that as just completely odd. And again, the guy down the cul-de-sac, it would be odd that we're even making a point of it. They'd be like, well, it was so long ago. Or there'd be the reality, it'd be the Goldilocks, where we see it a certain way, and the guy down the cul-de-sac or the girl down the cul-de-sac is just going to see it their way. It's going to play it right down the middle. And it's always Goldilocks. For example, if it was right now 1850, and I said, where are all the relatives of all these founding fathers? They don't exist. And this was 1850 Chicago. It would be close enough to that time where somebody like, yeah, where they all go? We don't know of any of these relatives running around or people claiming their name, claiming that it was their grandfather. See, 1850 would be so close. There's no Goldilocks there. But it's just far enough now. See, it's just far enough away from the founding fathers where I can make the presentation how that doesn't add up, but the people down the cul-de-sac just, it's so long ago, I don't really put much stock in that, Matt. It's just Goldilocks. Isn't it convenient how it's always right down the middle? Let's not lose sight of the main point being presented. The only point that's important in this entire video is, let's say the reality is a scale. And when I say Goldilocks, everything's balanced out. We see it a certain way. The guy down the cul-de-sac sees it a certain way. So it's a scale. And what are the chances you just pick things at random, like those old-fashioned scales, like the woman of justice with the sword or whatever. Oh, we should break that damn thing down. And the real meaning behind that sometime probably, but she holds a scale. No, just pick something at random and put it on this side of the scale. Then you just pick something at random and put it on the other side. Oh my gosh, what a coincidence. It's kind of balancing. And then whatever you put over here, and you just go into Hermione's grab bag and you put something on the other side of the scale, and oh my gosh, it's balancing again. It's like the nines with Ryan Reynolds. Every time he rolls the dice, it's a 9. Well, if over and over again, every time you put two different objects, you're just going into your grab bag, pulling out the Hungarian horntail, put them on the left side of the scale, and whatever you put on the right balances. The reality keeps doing that. It's always, it can be seen this way or it could be seen that way, depending on if you're a conspiracy theorist or a normie. And it's just not possible that any normal world could work this way. Call it whatever you want. A sim, a matrix, it doesn't matter. It's just not a real world. It couldn't possibly balance it out every time, pull it off. And it's like, okay, well, I don't know. Let's just really mix up the scale. It can't balance every time. Let's just put a big pile of mud on one side of the scale, and then the other side of the scale, feathers, and now it's finally not going to balance, feathers versus, but you've got to put up 20,000 feathers, so now it balances. So why'd you put up 20,000? I don't know. It balanced. It's like, okay. So, but then as the conspiracy theorist will say to the people down the cul-de-sac, what kind of world could pull this off? And they would be like, well, you're crazy because the only way to see it is the way that it's being presented on Aaron Burnett's Out Front. There's no balancing of anything. You guys see the other side, but there is no other side according to Wolf Blitzer, and guys are just crazy. Again, tens of thousands of examples I'm just thinking like at random. I remember, I'll show this again on a freevoice.io video when I'm doing a video. This is just going to be audio today. I actually plan on doing a video, but it just got into a long podcast MP3 format. I want to try to get it out as soon as I can, so we'll do the video some other time. But the opening, the news as it's reporting the morning of 9/11 is the most fascinating thing. It's incredible. If you remember, I've shown it on the YouTube channel back when we could show more. The morning of, before it took place, there's all this predictive symbolism that's laid down. Even a Tom Brokaw special report. He says, let's go to Tom Brokaw. Let's see what Tom Brokaw is going to be looking at tonight on the NBC Evening News at 6:30. And Tom Brokaw says, 911, a number that millions of Americans call, but they're doing a segment on 911. And again, here we go again. Well, Matt, that's obviously planned. There's a whole lot more in terms of what the news was talking about across the board that whole morning than just that. So in other words, let's just keep to the topic here, the Goldilocks reality. Whether you believe it's all called in or not, it doesn't matter for what we're talking about here. We see all these news headlines and the way the news is being presented, and there's like 10 things that the NBC News talks about that can all be related to the upcoming event 9/11. If you want to get kind of vague, there's like 10 things. So we would say there's such obvious predictive programming in what the news is talking about just an hour before the event on 9/11. Where Goldilocks, where I would show that to a relative, and they would be like, "You're out of your mind." Like they just wouldn't see any of it. They would say, "Okay, I see that Tom Brokaw is going to do a story later tonight about 9/11, and he's previewing it the morning of 9/11." But Matt, there's been a lot of news outlets that every so often talk about the emergency call system in the United States. They would just have a way to explain it away. It's always right down the middle where we see it as obvious and they won't see it. And it's just, how many of these could we do? Thousands and thousands. There's no real world that could pull this off. All right? It's not even worth talking about anymore. So it doesn't, when like in terms of me saying you don't have to understand what it really is, all you have to understand is that the world's not real. And we want to cry out, and people want to cry out to me, then what is it? We'll never truly understand it. It doesn't matter. Because the chase of all you need, the chase of understanding it keeps you away from yourself. Woi, W-O-I, woi, about yourself. That keeps you from yourself, the chase of it. You just have to come to the conclusion that it's not real. It couldn't pull the shit off time after time. The Goldilocks principle is impossible in any natural world that arose organically from the Big Bang. I mean, it's just, whatever. It's a joke. So it leads you very quickly to step 2. And then, step 2 should immediately lead to step 3. It tells you all you need to know about yourself. The atheist position is just, I have a lot of problems with very large organized religion. Of course, I have issues with it, with the large infrastructures, but the atheist position that this just, we're just flesh, and this all came from random space dust, and the moon was somehow. Well, how did the moon come together? Oh, well, Matt, if you look into there's a NOVA program that addressed that very thing. Like an object the size of Mars crashed into the Earth through the formation of the universe slightly after the Big Bang. Neil deGrasse Tyson will tell you this, and then the fragments, all the little fragments, they coalesced over hundreds of millions of years into the moon, and they believe all this stuff. This is like the atheist position. It all just came about. Like, what? What? Well, where was the center of gravity that brought all the pieces of the moon together? How did that work? All these an object the size of, this is the official story about the moon. It's just complete. Any first grader could think about this for 5 minutes and be like, "No, that's impossible." But nobody thinks about it. So all these pieces, the Earth is like Saturn, all these pieces. Where was the center of gravity that brought all these pieces of the moon together? And then what stuck them together personally? Maybe they did come together. Wouldn't pieces float off? How did it form a perfect circular sphere? When these pieces, wouldn't it end up looking like we'd have something that looked like a Chernobyl potato flying around the Earth, like something that's all warped, or one side is all mangled, like somebody trying to grow carrots on the other side of Chernobyl, big huge anomaly, a big warped head on one side, and it wouldn't be perfectly symmetrical where Da Vinci says it's almost impossible to draw a perfect circle just by hand. You have to be one of these master artists to do it. But the moon is absolutely perfect. Like I could see if it was is there like a river rock can get smoothed in a river, but what would have smoothed the moon down into a perfect sphere? These are all common sense things that I guess we might be able to get through to some people if they would ever talk to us about certain things. But at this point, we're so armed with certain facts or truths that you just can't, like when I'm talking about the moon, you just can't get through this. So that the people around us won't talk to us. They simply will run in the other direction. There is no possible way, based on what they say space is, that an object the size of Mars or something a little smaller slammed into the Earth, and there hundreds and billions of little fragments all came together and into perfect sphere. Yeah, sure. Goldilocks, guys, gives the reality away as fake. Well, what is it then? How is it generated? We don't need to know any of that. And that endless rabbit hole keeps you from yourself. Thanks for listening.